A big thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this week's video. If you need a website or a domain, go to squarespace.com/James for 10% off your first purchase. Plug this in here. This wire's a bit clumsy. Maybe I can research how to get a better wire or something. No, I have no idea what's just happened. Ho-ho! The phone's not in here. I got it like 3 days ago, and I didn't have the willpower or the patience to wait until I recorded this video to open it, so there's no sort of unboxing here. I couldn't be one of those unboxer YouTubers, to be honest. I haven't got the patience. I'm like a puppy when I'm waiting for something exciting. I sit by the front window, wait for the delivery driver, and then as soon as I've got the package off the delivery driver, I tear the box to shreds. With my hands, not my teeth, but it still looks like a puppy's done it. And then Emily comes home from work and has to climb over a mountain of shredded cardboard, which, to be honest, doesn't always go down that well. Anyway, so 3 or 4 days ago, I got this, my new iPhone 12 Pro Max. Fairly certain that's the name of it. And I'll spare you the cinematic B-roll. A, because I can't really do cinematic B-roll. B, because you've probably already seen it. C, because it's just a phone. And D, because this has now got 3 days of life on it. Dust and fingerprints and peanut butter. And I've got a case on it as well, because I don't like to live life on the edge. Anyway, this isn't really a phone review because I'm not qualified to do a phone review. In fact, the last time I had my hands on a new phone was my last new phone 2 or 3 years ago, which is this, a Pixel 2, which is now completely battered. It doesn't really charge anymore, which is the main reason I've upgraded, to be honest, because as you probably know, it's no good having a phone that doesn't really charge. Now, lots of videos that focus on these cameras or these phones, these camera phones, that's a word from like 2009, isn't it? Camera phone. But lots of these kinds of videos that are done about these phones by photographers focus in on image comparisons between these and the cameras that they use day to day, typically big DSLRs or mirrorless cameras, whatever it might be. And they'll put the images side by side and try and get you to work out which is which. And most of the time it's pretty obvious which is the phone image and which is the proper camera image. Unless you get the lighting just right, then you might not be able to tell. And sometimes it's made a bit harder by the YouTube compression, but for the most part, it's pretty easy to tell, so I don't really see the point in doing that kind of test. But the biggest difference between a camera like this, I think, and a camera that you would typically call a pro-grade camera is not sensor size and it's not resolution, it is buttons. So as you can see on this, my trusty old G9, which is 3 years old now, it's covered in buttons, and the reason it's covered in buttons is that the manufacturer decided that the photographer should be able to make decisions on location about how the camera should be set up to take a particular photo. So in this case, Lumix decided that it's important that the photographer has the control to set the camera up as they wish. And that, I think, is the biggest part of what makes a camera a pro camera. Now, lots of people will argue about whether the sensor is big enough in this camera to be called a pro camera. Lots of people will argue about whether it's got enough resolution to be called a pro camera. But I've seen lots of great photos that have been published from phone cameras, and therefore the photographer is getting paid for them, which is the definition of professional. So yeah, I'm not concerned with sensor size, I'm not concerned with resolution, because like I say, I've seen lots of great photos from cameras like this. But what I want to know is, do I get enough control from it to have artistic license in how I want the camera to take photos? You know, if I decide not to take my camera on a hike, or a bike ride, or a kayak trip, will this be enough to enable me to still be able to get print quality photos, or photos from my portfolio, or photos from my books? By the way, the 2019 book will be back in stock soon. Had an issue with storage because of the house move and stuff, but it'll be back soon. Thank you for your patience. Anyway, in my quest to start finding answers, I went to my local castle yesterday, which is not as strange as it sounds here in Wales. They are everywhere. It's that one, Conway Castle. Very, very nice castle. Not pristine, mind, but when you've got a building that's literally hundreds of years old, I suppose you can't expect that. If I'd done my research, I'd be able to tell you exactly how many hundreds of years old, but I haven't. Conway Castle was built by Edward I during his conquest of Wales between 1283 and 1289. 700 years old. And to be fair, not every camera can tell you that. Anyway, my plan is to walk around the walls for a couple of hours, taking photos with my phone, and by the time I get back here, I'm hoping that it'll be dark. and I'll be able to test the low light capabilities of the iPhone 12 Max. Max? Yes, Max. Terrible with names. Right then, first photos I took, and it goes without saying that none of these are portfolio images. I'm hoping to get out and do some proper photography next week, which I said last week, but I've still been packing up your prints from the print sale. I can't thank you enough. Thank you so much for your support. But yeah, hoping to do some proper photography next week. But these are just test shots, and hopefully they'll be good enough to help me work out whether this is pro, even if the images aren't. Right, this is the first photo of the castle that I got from the iPhone. It's a JPEG, and I took it in the native camera app. And for comparison, this is what the S5 that I'm filming this video on, this is what the S5 got raw. And this is what I did with the S5 file in post-production. Now, to be honest, I can confirm after trying that it's very difficult to match or get anywhere close to that final result of the raw file from the S5 with a JPEG of the iPhone shot, because even though I shot in the picture profile that's labeled original, which to me at least means it's something like natural, I found it very, very unnatural. To my mind, the images don't really look anything like real life, which is fine. You can choose to post-process images to not look anything like real life, but if you've got a JPEG that looks nothing like real life, then it's quite difficult to change that in any other way than how it already is. Now that isn't necessarily a huge problem because you can use third-party apps to shoot in RAW. So for example, I took the same kind of shot with the Moment app, but shooting RAW this time, and then I was able to edit that to basically look pretty much the same as the S5 file. Obviously the detail's not the same, the noise performance isn't the same, the dynamic range is definitely not the same, but for the most part, it looks pretty similar when you're looking at it on a phone screen. The thing is though, that doesn't tell the whole story, because what makes this camera phone, done it again, camera phone, what makes this phone camera so impressive is the deep fusion and the smart HDR and the depth of field analysis when you're shooting in portrait mode. All those kinds of things and the stuff that goes on in the chip in this phone is what helps to make this such a compelling package. And if you end up shooting RAW on a third-party app, you're forfeiting all of that, and you might as well get a much cheaper phone. Now there is a fix coming for this. It's called Apple Pro RAW. They love to call things Pro, don't they? And it's my understanding that Pro RAW will basically be a RAW file, essentially a RAW file, but post all the kind of computational photography, deep fusion, algorithm, smart HDR type stuff, which means you'll be able to benefit from all that stuff, but have much more control over things like dynamic range, and you'll be able to choose your white balance, for example, which you can't do at the moment in the native app, which is bonkers, particularly considering you can only shoot in JPEG. Now, to be honest, you won't always want to use the smart HDR stuff because, well, look at this photo of a bird. And yes, most of the seagulls around here are the size of cats. It's madness. Don't eat food outdoors if you ever come to this area, and you can thank me later. Yeah, so this photo of a seagull, it looks like there's 3 of them, because obviously the seagull is moving quite quickly, and the HDR is separate exposures, and therefore the ghosting is, well, visible. But hopefully with Pro RAW, just like with JPEG in the native camera app, you'll be able to turn off HDR and stuff like that. Fingers crossed. I mean, to be honest, I find it incredible how Apple has developed an amazing piece of hardware coupled with incredible software, but hasn't given you the ability to select white balance. The white balance thing blows my mind, particularly, as I said, when you can only shoot JPEG in the native app and you can't select white balance. Whatever the camera selects, you're stuck with, basically. And yeah, with photography, that's annoying. With video, it basically makes the files unusable. So take a look at this footage and watch the white balance change. And like I say, I'm not a phone expert, so there might be something in the settings that I've missed that means you can actually lock the white balance, but I've not seen it. And essentially, as far as I can tell, if you're out vlogging in changeable conditions with your 4K camera phone that's got fantastic autofocus, smart HDR features and brilliant image stabilization, you have to use a third-party app just to be able to lock your white balance and keep it consistent. That is bonkers. And what it also seems to mean is that you have to deal with other workarounds then. So for example, if I use the Moment app to do recording, I can control the white balance, but then I can't shift between different lenses mid-clip, which is one of the best things about shooting video with this. That drives you mad. At the risk of sounding like I'm ranting a bit, the low light performance with the video in this, it is quite impressive. I mean, even when it got super dark, if I stuck to the middle lens, the wide lens, which has got the brightest aperture, and it's working with sensor shift image stabilization, the performance is pretty impressive for a phone, I've got to say. Okay, it's pretty dark now, but you can't really tell from this footage because the exposure's been boosted. And the image still looks pretty clean to my eyes, which is impressive. I'd say it's actually about that dark. But the camera's exposure obviously doesn't make it look like that. And as I say, the image still looks fairly clean. That's quite impressive. I mean, I don't know about you, check out this footage, but I think I could use this perfectly fine in blue hour, up in the mountains, just vlogging away. I don't think there'd be too much problem with that at all. I think I might also get some kind of light that I could stick on the side of the phone, but for the most part, very impressive. And the low light photos are impressive too, particularly with night mode and particularly again with the wide angle lens that's the brightest. I mean, you can shoot 1, 2, 3 second handheld photos and not need a tripod, which is perfect for people like me who, as I've said thousands of times, hate tripods. It's really impressive. Really, really impressive, this phone. Particularly, as I say, that bright lens enabling you basically to shoot in much lower light than any other camera phone has been able to. I mean, all cameras with small sensors, that's their Achilles heel, not being able to shoot in low light. And this, I mean, it's not perfect, it's nowhere near as good as a bigger sensor, but it's pretty good. And I do understand why Apple doesn't kit out the camera app with all the features that a camera like this has. I get it. Most people that buy this Pro phone will buy it because it's called Pro and because it's the biggest and it's the best that Apple make, and people just want the biggest and best and they don't want to be bombarded with loads of options that they don't understand in their camera app. I get that, but I think that you can't really consider a product like this Pro as a photography tool unless you've got much more control than you currently have. That said, when Pro RAW comes out, which I'm super excited about, I hope it's coupled with some more controls for things like white balance and even things like bracketing. Like the HDR features in this camera are very clever, but I'd like to have control over them. I'd like to, for example, be able to select how many stops of light are between the exposures that are being compiled for the Smart HDR, and therefore you get a say in how realistic the photos look, because some of these photos, they're very clever, but they don't look realistic and there's not a whole lot you can do about that. And for the most part, in my experience so far, it's been absolutely fine to use third-party apps. My argument is that you shouldn't really have to when you've got a phone that's marketed as Pro. And I know it's an all-round multi-tool, it's not just a camera, and you could argue that it's Pro because it's fast at other things. But the camera is one of the biggest selling points, or the cameras, the lenses. It's one of the biggest selling points of the phone. And I don't think it offers the control that it should at this price point and being marketed as Pro. It's my roundup so far. When the Pro RAW comes out, I will do another video and we'll see if that changes things. But for now, it's not Pro. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. I've got a little vlog setup coming along for this phone actually. Take a look at this. And this round here. Isn't this little tripod cool that's currently sat on? This little tiny Manfrotto tripod. Just sits like that. My dad gave this to me actually. Really cool. And then I've just got a little phone holder and then my mic transceiver. My Rode Wireless Go on top, and then it's got a bit of a clumsy connection at the moment, to be honest. Maybe I'll try and tidy that up. Anyway, a big thank you to you for watching and a huge thank you to this week's video sponsor, Squarespace. So over the course of my ownership of the Pixel 2, I had lots of issues uploading photos to Instagram, Twitter, other social media platforms from this phone. I don't know if it's the phone, if it's Android, if it's me, if it was Instagram, who knows? But basically, I felt very lucky to have my website, my Squarespace website, because that's the only place online that you could go to look at my photos as I wanted them to be seen. So when you upload a photo to Squarespace, it gets optimized for all kinds of different devices and sizes. And that, as a photographer, is one of the very best things about having a Squarespace website. So if you're interested in having an online image portfolio of your own, then go to squarespace.com, start your free trial. And after that, if you'd like to make a purchase, go to squarespace.com/James for 10% off your first purchase. A huge thank you to Squarespace for their fantastic websites and their continued support of this channel. And thank you to you for watching. And next time, I'll hopefully be out, maybe vlogging with this. You'll have to keep an eye on the white balance though. See you then. And it seems to be the case that a different approach has been taken. Just getting a phone call. Hi, James speaking. Oh, sorry, calling on behalf of where?